My name is Agnieszka Łukaszczyk, and don't fall down. And I chair the Sustainability Task Force of the IAF. And IAF has this task force because it has realized that sustainability should be an integral part of the discussion when we talk about space technology and how it can benefit the Earth and the place that we live on. So our job is to actually talk about topics that are not your space topics, let's say, but about topics where space actually can be a solution and can really be impactful. Everybody knows about Amazon. It's the lungs of the world, and we should all care about it, regardless if we live in the area or not. And for various reasons, Amazon, as many other forests around the world, have been struggling. There have been a lot of fires recently in the Amazon. Historically, there's been deforestation and many different issues, and it is in all our interest to actually do something about that. So I brought together this panel of fabulous experts and people who really can give us some insights. You're probably wondering, why do we have Norway on a panel about Amazon? But I will explain that because there is a connection. And I will introduce my panelists very quickly, and then we're going to get right to the substance. And I hope that we'll have some time to actually take your questions later on. So to my immediate right, we have Christian Hagley Hansen. Is that good enough? Who's heading the Norwegian Space Agency. Then we have Irene Benito, who many of you probably know. She's face of Planet in Europe. And she works for Planet Labs. She's a director for government affairs at Planet Labs. Then we have Tom Greenwood from ISI, and he's in charge of mission sales and competitive intelligence. And last but not least, we have Rodrigo Leonardi, who's the director at Brazilian Space Agency, because obviously you cannot talk about Amazon without having Brazil at a table. So we're going to have very different perspectives of people coming from the private and public sector, and how that all intertwines, and what are we doing. But let's set a stage a little bit. In the last 10 years, in the last decade, many things have happened in the space sector. We are experiencing this space renaissance. Many companies came to be. A lot of these new space companies happen to be mission-driven companies. So they actually really do have a mission to help life on Earth by using this satellite technology. And they've been doing that. But there are also governments that have been very active, in public space agencies, and governments that have been also acting active in imaging the Amazon, but also doing a lot of research and science there. And so I would like to set the scene a little bit. Maybe, Rodrigo, I will start with you. Given the fact that you are from the Brazilian Space Agency, you probably know the most about the Amazon, and it's probably the closest to your heart because it's in your backyard. Can you tell us a little bit, first of all, what the agency is doing, and maybe a little bit how you work with, how do you see the involvement of the commercial sector when imaging the Amazon? Is that helpful? Do you collaborate? How do you see that partnership?
Okay, well, thank you for the invitation to contribute for this dialogue. I work at the Brazilian Space Agency, and these days I'm in charge of our space projects. And I would say that Earth observation, since day one, is a high priority for the Brazilian Space Agency. And inside of our portfolio, monitoring the deforestation of the Amazon has been something that we've been doing traditionally since day one. Actually, the agency today, we are 30 years old, but our monitoring deforestation of the Amazon, we have a program that's 36 years old. So we've been doing this on a regular basis since 1988. So we have a timeline of observation of the Amazon that spans 3 decades. Later on, in 2004, we also created a real-time detection of deforestation, so we can actually send our teams there to mitigate deforestation. So for 20 years, we've been doing this on a regular basis. The problem is the Amazon is a very large area. It's basically more than half of the Brazilian territory and also very remote. Only 5% of the population is living there. So, monitoring the Amazon from space is something that we have a lot of experience, but then acting on the information that you have is much harder, right? So you have to, we have smaller teams. You cannot go in all the places of the Amazon, but it's something that is a priority and will be a priority for us. 3 years ago, we have launched Amazonia 1. It was our very first 100% Brazilian Earth observation satellite. It's in routine operation these days, so we are using Amazonia 1 to monitor our own territory. We have also 2 other satellites that we have assembled with China that they help us doing the job. And of course, we benefit from the international community. We use Landsat. More recently, we have been using Sentinel. With ICE-I, we have 2 SAR objects that we have launched recently, and we use it together with Sensipan, which is an organization that's monitoring the Amazon. So there's plenty of expertise there, and with space, we can help with the task. Of course, the Brazilian Space Agency is not in charge of protecting the environment, or we cannot legally act or enforce the law, but we provide the data and the space systems that are necessary for mitigating it. These days, what we see also is that a lot of the community is also looking into smaller space systems. We have Planet. So we have seen that with small sats, you also can do the job and maybe add value. And together with our industry, last year we launched a 6U satellite. It's called VCube, which has a payload, is a Brazilian payload on board, and with a resolution of about 3 meters. So we are also trying to pursue one day where we're going to have the capability to maybe to have a small constellation in Brazil. I think that's for the beginning. I think it's an overview of what we're doing. We've been traditionally doing it with larger satellites, and now we see a trend where we may also improve the task with smaller ones.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is really helpful, and I think it's good to kind of. Sometimes we forget that you've been doing this for 36 years, and only now, I think in the last few years, we're talking about this publicly, about what these satellites and that data can really do, what kind of information can give it to us, but it's not really so new. Obviously, we can see more now and in more detail, but you have a really wealth of experience there. And
if I just to complement, in 2017 we have consolidated all the data we had in hands, and today is publicly available on our website called Terra Brasilis. So if you browse it, Terra Brasilis, you're going to find all the data we have so far.
Excellent, thank you. And you've mentioned both of the companies that are sitting here. And I chose them for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think they're both excellent companies, and they both did something revolutionary in the space sector. So Planet was the first company in the world that miniaturized optical satellites, and ICE-I was the first company in the world that miniaturized radar satellites. And it really was a game changer of what you can do, what you can see, how often you can see, and how much data costs. It has changed everything. And Irene, maybe I'll go to you. Can you tell me, and of course Planet is a mission-driven company, it's a public benefit corporation. So what are you doing over the Amazon? I know you can see trees on a single tree level, but also, and maybe this is a bit of a tricky question and hard question, but those who know me, they know that I ask tricky questions. I like to push the envelope a little bit. But is it just a mission for you to do this, or is there money there? Is there a support? Do you see there's a support for, because obviously space is a hard and expensive business, right? So you can have a mission, but you also have to sustain yourself. Is there enough support, financial support from governments and understanding to give contracts to satellite companies to do this job, or you really do it because it's really it's part of your kind of impact strategy?
Thank you. It's a two-part answer. I think, well, firstly, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a fantastic panel, and I'm honored to be sharing a chair and a spot with all my fellow panelists. So, hello, my name is Irene. I work as a director for government affairs at Planet, and as Agnieszka said, Planet is extremely invested in the topic of deforestation monitoring and restoration efforts. I think Rodrigo very correctly pointed to the enormous value of Earth observation data when we're looking at deforestation. This is a technology that is uncomparable to other kinds of tools that we can have to detect and fight deforestation. The coverage that we get with satellites is just unparalleled to other kinds of technologies. So we're looking at drones or planes or field deployments. You cannot get this daily large-scale coverage and harmonization of data that you get with Earth observation. So it's a very useful tool. Planet comes in, as Aga says, with a new way of doing space. And I mean, I'm going to be speaking only about Planet here, but we are part, and I think an important part of the new space revolution, which has been fundamental, I think, to fill in some very, very, in a way, lethal gaps that public missions had when we're talking about deforestation. So in 2017, Planet completes this constellation, and we're able to monitor every day. We like to say at a near tree level, so 3.5 meter resolution, the whole planet. So we're doing a line scan of the Earth. Every day, you don't get daily imagery because there's clouds, but you can also fuse this data with others. And it means that on a daily basis, we can detect anywhere in the world where something is happening to a tree or to a small group of trees. So imagine what this can do for efforts of deforestation fighting in the Amazon. This means that when a single tree is chopped down, when you have selective logging, when you have a road that is being built to then bring in the machinery and the logs out, when you have degradation, you can detect it almost in real time, and you can empower those that can take action with information to know where to go. And I think a great project that we have there is with the Brazilian Federal Police, Polícia Federal, which are using our data and the analytics of our partner, ESICON, which is a local partner in Brazil, to build, to use and leverage an early warning deforestation alert system. So every day they're using our daily imagery over the Amazon, the Brazilian Amazon, and they get alerts every time an incident of deforestation or forest disturbance happens, and they can then go and investigate. And with this, they're fighting illegal deforestation caused by illegal mining, by the harvesting of illicit drugs, by the building of airstrips for transportation of these drugs, by illegal extensions of agriculture, et cetera, et cetera. And the project is having great results. In the first year, illegal deforestation fell by 55% in Brazil. And there's been, I believe, over 3 billion of fines and seized assets that the police have been able to take from offenders. Because as I said, they can take action almost in real time, which you couldn't with lower revisit and lower resolution constellations. But of course, they're all complementary. And now about the mission. So Planet exactly was founded on this mission to image the entire world so that we have transparency and we can take informed actions to protect our planet, really, and have a more sustainable and more safe world. What happens that some of these issues are just too big. So we have, the fight against climate change, the fight against environmental decline, security globally, which I think no single actor can really tackle unilaterally. No company, no government, no NGO, no organization. So I think that what PPPs bring to the table in case of these humongous challenges cannot be underestimated, and we're working closely with the Norwegian government on this, and I really think it's the way forward, and I can speak more about that later, but I think I already took too much time, but yeah.
Thank you. You have actually opened, led us to the next questions that I want to take you to, but before that, it's actually, so those of you who don't know, I used to work at Planet, and also I'm going to tell you a little bit personal anecdote because it's going to demonstrate how successful this project in Brazil is. So it just happens that my husband is Brazilian and I spent some time in Brazil, and he's from this small town in Minas Gerais called Uberaba. And I had to go to Police Federal to extend my visa because we were there for 8 months. and I had to fill out a paperwork. And it's a, small town, middle of Brazil, small office, police office. And I had to put my profession where I work, and I put planet. And the guy, the officer, again, in this small town, was like, planet, we use your data all the time. So the fact that, like if I go in Europe to a lot of police, they would never know about this, but it's so spread that all these offices around the country are really using that data to the point that it's like it's not a big deal almost, like you have access to Wi-Fi, you have access to planet, so I was really impressed by that. And you also mentioned that, about your imagery, and that you cannot, you're imaging every day, but you cannot see through clouds. Well, ICEYE can. ICEYE can see through clouds. They have radar satellites. So it's a little bit of a different model. It's actually excellent when you can use two data sources and get and fuse them, because then you really get the right information. But tell us a little bit about ICEYE, Tom. Why? What are you guys doing in Brazil? Because I know you are doing quite a lot of work. And also, is it more difficult with radar data to reach end customers? Because radar data is a lot more complicated to read, to deal with, right? It's not just a picture. And we know that the end user doesn't really care where the data is coming from. They want answers to their questions. They want solutions. How do you tackle that? Do you work with partners? Give us a little bit of an overview.
Sure, thank you. And thank you for the invitation to be here. It's a real pleasure to be part of this panel. So for those that don't know, you've probably already heard a little bit this morning anyway about ICEYE. So we are a Finnish-based Earth observation company, and we specialize in the miniaturization of radar technology. So SAR is not innovative and new in and of itself. It's really the miniaturization of that technology that has seen ICEYE benefit from this kind of small sat revolution. And rightly so, we kind of focus on two things: persistent monitoring and high revisit. So the persistent monitoring comes into the fact that the technology is unimpeded by cloud cover and meteorological conditions, which means that you can acquire data 24/7 in total darkness. And we've seen some really, really effective use cases around that in terms of monitoring a region such as the Amazon, which is covered in cloud sort of 60% of the year, and also illicit activity, which tends to take place at, under the cover of darkness. So we've seen really, really effective use cases by some of our customers in those kind of areas. The fact that we've been able to miniaturize this technology and mount it to a small satellite about the mass of 100 or 120 kilos means that we've been able to launch the largest constellation of SAR satellites in the world. So we've launched more than 40 satellites now since 2018, which gives us that really high revisit rate. And I think I checked yesterday, the Amazon region, we can image anywhere between 7 and 8 times per day in a number of different modes. So we can kind of target those applications based on the resolution and the footprint of the image that you want to see on the ground. Coming to your point about the challenging use of radar data, it is a skill, and many organizations don't necessarily possess the in-house expertise to analyze radar imagery. It is a very specialized technology, and to address that point, we have focused on 3 different verticals. So we have missions customers who are interested in owning and operating their own asset on orbit. The 2 satellites that we sold to the Brazilian Air Force have been mentioned already. We have data customers who are expert SAR users and can actually extract the benefits and the insights from SAR imagery. And we have many different use cases and customers in Brazil using the data. But we also realize that there are experts in geospatial data that are potentially not experts in SAR. So we have a solutions business line that is specifically focused at those users. And that is where we have our own in-house team of analysts that can extract information from SAR imagery, often big stacks of SAR imagery, so 100, 200 images over the course of a few days. And then that data set is what we share with the customer. So our initial focus has been on flooding and wildfires. And actually, the flooding that happened in Brazil earlier this year, we shared with the Brazilian government, and they were very, very grateful to receive the data in a ready-to-use format. But deforestation is actually in our pipeline as well. So we're looking to launch some kind of deforestation monitoring product in the future, where we can actually quantify the amount of land that's been cleared using our own kind of analysts, and then share that information so that it's much more readily accessible for users.
Great, thank you so much. This is really, really exciting to see that you can reach all those different corners of the world and actually have a positive impact. Irene, you also mentioned public-private partnerships, and that brings me to Christian. I said in the beginning, you know, why do we have Norway talking about the Amazon? Well, Norway is one of those strange countries that actually funds public good projects around the world simply because it's the right thing to do. And when I say strange, I say it in a, you know, as a compliment, because I think more countries would do that, should do that. So what Norway is doing, and Irene touched a little bit on this, but in short, and you can tell us more about it, they have, they do a lot of things, but the thing that I want to talk about is this program called NICFI, where they cooperate with FAO, and pretty much they procure commercial space data. They give it to FAO, and then FAO distributes it for free and certain licenses to all the countries in the tropical belt with the tropical forests. So about 30 degrees, I think, right, on both sides of the equator, so that they could use imagery to monitor their forests and stop or decrease deforestation. And as you can imagine, the Norwegian Space Agency is a big part of that program. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? That's number one. Number two, do you think it's working? Because NICFI has been in operation for a couple of years, for a while. And do you think, well, actually the answer is yes. I'm going to answer for you. If other countries should get involved, yes, they should get involved. And is that, like, do you think that is going to happen? Like, is there attraction? Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me on the panel. In this regard, I do represent the Norwegian government as an extended arm in terms of implementing their national strategy. And I think an important question is to put this into perspective. What is the actual ecosystem that we're talking about? I think Rodrigo obviously gives a great introduction of the perspective from Brazil, and then operational companies seeing how you can deal with the problem. From a Norwegian political viewpoint, we need to see this in a more holistic picture. So we are trying to, of course, monitor and understand what actually is happening through international cooperation. We just had our Ministry of Climate and Environment visiting Brazil in order to renew the commitment in cooperation on monitoring the rainforest. We know there are drastic changes. There are droughts in the Amazon, causing increase of forest fires. So counting trees is one thing, but we, as a government agency, we need to have the more holistic approach on what this is about. And saying that, the NICFI program, as you point out, the Norwegian International Climate and Forest Initiative, was initiated all the way back in 2008, before we started looking at satellite data. So this is, if you're looking at why are we here, it's an approach in terms of how do we see our role in terms of supporting protection of the tropical rainforest. So this started as a political initiative many years ago, and now when it emerged, the program was actually realized 2019, and the Planet in jointly with CEST, Norwegian company, and Airbus got the contract. Why this constellation? First of all, CEST is able to download and has contracts with Planet from the operation in Svalsat and many other places. Airbus had the historical data in terms of archives, so we need to see the long-term trends, as Rodrigo pointed out. So this is a long-term commitment. And you mentioned the development of the NICFI program. It's been running for 4 years. It's been funded by the Norwegian government. Now we're retendering this. We need to look at this in a longer perspective. And I'm very pleased to say that the Norwegian Prime Minister, Jonas Gahr Støre, he announced now at the end of September that we want to prolong this tropical rainforest program to 2035. So we're really talking about an extension. That doesn't mean that we have the money for all that period, but it says that there's a political will to do this. Currently, this is more than 60 countries involved in the NICFI program, 30,000 monthly users, so it does work. And you talked about it, and I really like the approach from Planet, looking at the total value chain. We really need to look at who are the end users, and I'm sure Rodrigo can comment on this. This was a theme on the Global Space Conference on Climate Change that we had in Oslo last year. How are you actually approaching the end user? Who are they, and how can you mentioned some of them, that they are saying that they are using this for real. This is what it's all about. So, and I think this is a challenge both to Planet and to ISI. I mean, it's fun building satellites. I come from the satellite industry myself, but you really need to you have to do it for a reason, and the answer is with Rodrigo. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, this is like, imagine if every country would have a project like this, just on one thing, one topic, a public good topic. We could really move forward when it comes to sustainability efforts, big time. So this is a fantastic model, and hopefully it's going to be replicated in other areas, and to see what a relatively small country, how it can be impactful globally, it's really admirable, and you have to do it, as you say, for a mission, right? Like you don't so. The country that Norway is paying for it. Planet, Irene, I would like to hear from you a little bit on that, because obviously Planet is paid for the data, but it's hugely discounted, right? And more than that, you could say that you're losing some customers because they get that data for free, but you still want to do it, right? So can you tell us a little bit about thinking behind that when it comes to Planet, because it's still a business, but it's a public benefit corporation.
Definitely, thank you. And great program, NICFI. I want to talk a bit about that after, but starting with the mission and how companies that are so mission-driven like Planet survive. We, as I said, we were launched really with this objective of taking the pulse of the planet and being able to help and support global efforts to preserve humankind and the Earth. And then we went public, so that was in 2012 and 2010. Agnieszka's looking at me. Yes.
We went public.
And we went public, in 2021 in December as a public benefits corporation. And what that means is that we're equally responsible to our shareholders for our financial performance as for the pursuit of our impact mission. So this means that our impact objectives are completely entrenched in every single decision that we take at the company. We make sure that our customers, that our partners, that our prospects are aligned or are complementary in their mission too. And we walk away from business if this doesn't work for real, but we also drive the development of our programs and of our projects and hardware. So we just launched a month ago our new hyperspectral satellite called Tanager. And so these are 420 spectral bands, 30 meters spatial resolution, and a lot of the data from this satellite is going to go to an NGO called Carbon Mapper, that is going to take the data and is going to analyze it to detect super emitters of methane and carbon. And this is one of the kind of impact projects that are really driving our hardware development at Planet. However, being impact-driven can be challenging because, of course, we also need to make money to build the satellites and pay salaries. And I think that's where, partnerships like NICFI make so much sense. When you're looking at a global public good like preservation of the Amazon, the issue is that everyone benefits, every single organism on the planet benefits from preserving tropical forests, but who's going to pay the bill? Like an individual, it's very difficult to pin down that one person that will pay for it. And that's why pulling together resources, pulling together technological development, pulling together financial commitments, expertise, et cetera, from the governments, which also have a public mission, and companies like Planet, makes a lot of sense. However, in the future, I'm hoping that in topics such as deforestation and preservation, we're going to actually be able to create a market. I think a big problem around public goods is this issue around externalities. So if you are a deforester, you think about, okay, how much does it cost me to cut a tree? So I have to pay for the equipment, my time investment, the opportunity cost, and then I'll get paid some money for this tree. But you don't factor in the cost to society of losing this tree or of planting a tree, because it's spread amongst everyone on the planet. But I think in Earth observation, we have a huge opportunity to help create incentives and price these externalities correctly. And that's something that we're also working on to make sure that we're not just launching satellites, but that the data is used. We have also just launched in Climate Week a new variable called forest carbon. And this is a first of its kind. It's every 3 months, so a quarterly base map of all the forest carbon in the world. So we're doing a carbon estimate of every tree and every forest globally, canopy height and canopy size. And we hope with this to be able to underpin effective carbon markets. So if we have a data source that is transparent, that is trusted, that is homogeneous and comparable across regions, people will be able to more effectively price and value the wealth and the value of these trees. And if then you're thinking about planting a tree, and not only are you getting satisfaction, but you're actually getting paid via carbon markets for that preservation efforts, then maybe we can start creating a market for this and not only relying on funding from donors and from foundations. So, and from, of course, also goodwill and investment of companies.
Thank you, Rene. Christian, you wanted to add something? Oh, okay. Rodrigo, well, was it directly to what? Yeah, go ahead, because I have another.
All right, thank you. I just don't want to take too much space, but I think this is a very, very important discussion. What is the actual cash flow? What is actually generating the money in this? And having a view of the total ecosystem. In Norway, in order to justify this, we are not only looking at the individual profitability of each company, which is important, and the board will require it. Sooner or later, you cannot go with a continued loss. We are always challenged to do a socioeconomic analysis, because much of this is non-tangible. You cannot access and saying that this has a worth of exact this much.
It's qualitative, not quantitative.
Yeah, it's qualitative, and much of our assignment is done by that. And that is why, when you're looking at the motivation for funding, the commercial sector, the companies, private investor, venture capital, they will look at a profit. They will have to require a return on investment. We are looking also at philanthropists. We have now the Bezos Earth Fund is now jointly funding the next phase of the NICFI program.
Wow.
50% jointly with the Norwegian government. I think this is a hugely important step, that you actually have people that see the value in this. The third element is the motivation of the government, and that's where you come on to the more socioeconomic analysis. So we need to put this all together, because the profitability of the company is important, but for the government, it's the whole value chain and how you view the ecosystem, how to make this work in the long run. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Rodrigo, did you want to add something to it? Or I have a question for you, but if you want to.
Well, I'll try to answer from the point of view of an agency. Of course, we always need industry together. Without industry, you don't have an ecosystem, so you don't have space systems. And I understand that industry has to look into profit. But since day one, we've been investing in our own space systems. We have invested in science in Brazil without looking into the profit aspect of it. And actually, since all the data we acquire with our satellites, they're made public and freely available to the international community. And it's something that we want to keep that way. Of course, we have find some models in Brazil, some industry that they manage to profit from it, but it's still what you would call old space. Main client is government. If it's government, it means taxpayers. So we need to explain to the taxpayers the value of going to space.
Right.
And I'm afraid that here, of course, I don't have to explain how important it is for you to have a satellite monitoring your own territory. Of course, it looks like trivial for us, but society, they still don't quite understand it. And also politicians and decision makers, they don't understand how valuable this is. So if you have a system that is delivering results to your society, and society understands how valuable the results are, then everything else will find a place. And even industry, they will manage to sell a service that we appreciate. They will find the profit they need. We will understand why we're doing that. And society, at the end of the day, will be the one benefiting from it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is a very good point that you've mentioned, that we need to have a really good narrative when it comes to the public at large, because we all, preaching to the choir here, right? And we all understand, we all agree, we all nod. But really, the users are out there. And a lot of them think when you say space, it's weird. And they think also when you say satellites, they think it's extremely expensive. And so it's really important that we actually go out there and talk about simple terms about the tangible impact. And I think this is what we can do a little bit better, Christian.
I think we're talking about something really important. This is about taxpayers' money when you're talking about government. This is very, very important because it's a competition between everything else, transportation, healthcare, education, so forth. And you asked, does it work? And the measures that the Norwegian government are imposing on this is that we have agreements, like with Brazil and other countries, saying that there are some targets in terms of the rate of reducing the deforestation. There was an example, it was not Brazil, another country, where they're not reaching the target. And then the government is in a position to say, okay, so we'll turn down the money flow until you restore the actions. And this actually worked, because it was only 2 years ago where they turned out the flow of money, and then the restoration came back on track. And then you can say, okay, so now we continue to support the prevention of your tropical rainforest. It actually does work because it's money involved.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Tom, I wanted to I wanted to see if you wanted to add something to this conversation. I know you governments are your clients, and Brazil is one of them. Do you, and obviously satellites, you both Planet and ISA operate both in kind of a civil, environmental sphere, but also in security, right? And defense and intelligence. And a lot of times, we know, let's be honest, more money comes from the defense and intelligence. This is where governments really spend money. Do you see, from your experience, is there enough of revenue for those applications and for those programs that we're discussing here? For a company like ISI, or we have a long way to go?
Yeah, good question. So you're absolutely right. A lot of those kind of key expertise and the kind of advanced users are in the defense and intel sector. And that is where we see a lot of the data market that a lot of the data that we're bringing down to Earth, it goes into that kind of use case. Something that hasn't been mentioned so far is the use of data in academia and scientific research, which actually is an area where we strive to do better and do more. And to that end, we're actually working with the European Space Agency and the European Commission on making our data more available through the Copernicus program, through third-party missions, to try and encourage the use of data and uptake of data in those scientific applications and journals, which, okay, those are academic exercises and potentially are not going to be able to take any action, but if they can then be used to inform action on the ground and inform decision makers, then that's a really key, important route into that discussion. So that's something that we're already doing, but we'd welcome more opportunity to do.
Thank you. Rodrigo, I want to go back to you because Amazon is obviously, I mean, the biggest portion of Amazon is in Brazil, but there are other countries that have pieces of it as well. And we're talking, you know, in these topics, you cannot avoid politics, obviously, right? So it's, and Christian mentioned how important it is to have this long-term view, right? So we have this continuity in these topics, in these projects. But a lot of decision makers in every country think in kind of election cycles, right? So I'm going to make decisions that are going to help me to get elected next time. Or somebody else comes from the other side of the spectrum and their priorities are going to be very different. And for us, from the sector, for scientists and people who kind of try to, you know, do the right thing outside of these politics, it's very difficult and frustrating sometimes to push these agendas forward. And then you look at Amazon and you have not only that, but you also have all these different countries involved. Do you see, is there a lot of collaboration between the countries, like, you know, like Peru, Colombia, Brazil, everybody who has stakes in Amazon? And are you able to build a common vision for the Amazon and how to restore it? Or is it kind of everybody does their own thing?
There is ongoing cooperation in South America, but indeed we should and we need to improve it. Of course, if you're talking about the Amazon, you always remember Brazil, but you cannot ignore that Colombia is there, Venezuela is there, French Guiana is there, so Europe is in the Amazon as well, Peru. So Amazon goes through all these borders, which implies international cooperation is a must. We have ongoing cooperation. The most intense partner we have in South America is Argentina, so it's in the south of the continent. But we are assembling together 2 satellites, and we hope our satellites will help providing Earth observation data that's valuable for protecting the Amazon. We've been discussing with Colombia, Venezuela, and Peru. We had a bilateral meeting yesterday about, you know, improving cooperations, but more can be done, I would say so. And also there's an idea that's flowing in South America about Latin American Space Agency. Maybe in the future, if ALCE gets to be implemented, by default, they have the duty to bring the continent together and decide what is the best agenda. And I would say with all the climate change challenges we see today, protecting the Amazon is a must, not only for Brazil and South America, as well for the entire world.
Absolutely. Christian, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think you're setting it straight, saying, you know, how is cooperation going on. I think this is exceedingly important. Obviously, Norway is not doing this in a vacuum either. There are many nations and actors who are engaged in this. So you have, you know, on the company level, you have on the national level, but you also have on the international cooperation. You have the Montreal, the Kunming-Montreal Agreement on you know, biodiversity, the Nature Agreement, which brings people together. You also have, for instance, the EU deforestation regulation, where Norway is part of this. So in terms of making this, having the holistic view and taking care of not only individual interest, but for the sake of everybody, you really need to have this type of regulation through the bodies like the EU, but also United Nations, and that is what drives cooperation. But it needs to be transparent. You need to tell people what you're doing and justify your initiatives. Yeah,
absolutely. No, I mean, it's clear there. Nobody can solve this alone. It's a really team sport. We have about 7 minutes left, and I'm wondering if there are any questions from the audience. It's an interesting topic. I already see a hand there in the back. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello? Yes. Didier Larry, I'm a personal retired consultant. A question to Planet and SI. If Amazon is so important, we know that the location of Amazon zone near the equator would be perfectly served by equatorial satellites or quasi-equatorial satellites with 1, 2, maybe 4 satellites, you reach immediately a 15-minute revisit. So this is very, very interesting. Do you have any plan in your company to particularly target this market of equatorial zones, Amazon, but also Indonesia, etc., with this particular orbit, equatorial orbit?
I can take it and say up front, I am not sure. I know that at the moment, the daily revisit that we have, so the roughly 200 satellites that are giving us the daily revisit are on a polar orbit, and that's how we're working. We do have a new constellation coming up for very high resolution 30 centimeter tasking satellites, which are going to be on different orbits. So potentially that one would allow us, and I know that the revisit and the plans are that there's going to be a 15-minute delay between tasking and delivery, and ideally this one could help with that too. But I've not heard of any plans to launch like specifically deforestation targeted assets. I know that our assets can be used for that, and also complementarily with other assets, for example, national assets, the Amazona constellation that Brazil mentioned, and for sure, ISA's radar satellites, I hope.
Yeah, very similarly from us. So at the moment, all of our satellites are in sun-synchronous orbit. They go over the poles. We do have plans to launch mid-inclination orbits. I don't think we have any plans further than that. But similarly to what's already been said by Planet, the sheer number of satellites that we're looking to put in those orbits will give us a high revisit rate everywhere, so including the equatorial regions and the Amazon. So once we get to that full capacity over the sun-synchronous orbits, we should be able to acquire imagery every 3 hours, which we think is pretty good for most use cases.
Yeah, because we cannot forget that satellites are very expensive, so build satellites just for that relatively, it's not small, but like in a, area, it's like, and it will be difficult to make a business case for it. But I think for national governments, though, or international communities, as a purely public good mission, that would make a lot more sense. I saw another hand earlier. Yeah, here's the lady.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. It was very inspiring. My question is about the gap between image and data acquisition and concrete and corrective action on ground. So what's the current alert system? How effective do you find it is? And how are you planning to harmonize it globally, internationally, and using the combination of different types of constellations and different types of satellites? For
Anybody,
any of you.
right?
Okay, you're talking about action, right? So in Brazil, we have a program which is 20 years old called DETER. DETER is a program where basically in real time we're monitoring the Amazon, and we can give alerts to IBAMA, who is an organization that's responsible for protecting the environment, and they can in a few days time to be on whatever is going on in the Amazon. And actually we make the data public a few days later, but we just avoid releasing it immediately because the people responsible for whatever is going on, they will know as well that we're after them. So this is a very concrete example of a space system that's already linked into our government organization. So we can give the alerts, and the organization responsible for enforcing the law can act as soon as possible.
Yeah, and that's according to the knowledge that I have also, that Brazil has been very efficient in the actual end state policing, to actually enforcing the proper regulation. But it will be a challenge in other countries where you perhaps have less enforcement capability, poorer infrastructure. It's hard to monitor, and the real-time capability, I'm sure that the companies can comment on that in terms of from you do the imagery and the piping down. What is the time factor? Mm-hmm. We are working also on illegal fishery, where you really need to have a time span less than 30 minutes in order to be able to take the perpetrator. Yeah. And so we're talking with Planet with this, we're talking with ISA, to looking at and I think the end state governance of this is really, really core to understand this from the end user perspective.
100%. And if I can add quickly to that, I think also like what is just so fantastic of Earth observation is that it can help us in cases when we have limited resources. And of course, like, you know, we can't have like trillions of police on the ground. And what it can do is that it can give us that information in almost real time to be able to then deploy resources when they're scarce to the places where something is happening. It can be a person, it can be a drone, it can be like something that goes and has a closer look. In terms of the project that we have in Brazil, it's been so impactful because by enhancing what is already publicly available, which is fantastic, and you know, like we are really standing on the shoulders of giants when we're talking about public missions, it gives us that small advantage that makes a whole difference, because it means that if you're able to detect a change at 3.5 meters resolution on a daily basis, you're going to be able to take action when the perpetrators are still there and before the damage is hundreds of square meters. So if you can take action when a couple of trees have been lost, a road is starting construction, and you can immediately go, you can catch them. If you have to wait for example, Sentinel-2 to pass over, maybe there's clouds, maybe a few weeks go by, you detect it at 10 meters per pixel, the damage is very large. So it can really, these new constellations that help fill in gaps are very, very impactful for this effective action that we need in the case of deforestation.
Yeah,
Can I go very quickly? So I would say downlink latency for all radar providers is a significant challenge, especially as we see the trends in increased resolution. So a lot of satellite providers can now image down to 25 centimeters, ISI included. And also we're seeing longer dwell times. So we have much more information-rich imagery, which can significantly increase the size of the image file that we have to try and downlink to Earth. So it's a significant challenge. We have a global access to a global ground station, and at the moment we can, from acquisition to delivery, we can commit to 3 hours. But we have plans to improve on that in the coming years.
And just one last comment. So next year, November next year, we're going to host the climate conference COP30 in Belém do Pará, which is the Amazon. And I would like to invite the community to go there and explain the importance of space systems for monitoring and protecting the Amazon. Thank you.
It's so good that you mentioned that. I forgot, and it's so important that the community is there, that we're part of these discussions, that we don't just talk to each other, but we actually talk to people, to decision makers, and those who can really implement our data and make a difference. So I'm planning to be there, and I hope many of you as well. We're gonna have to wrap it up. It's been fantastic to talk to you about this. I feel like this is such an important topic, and we're talking about Amazon, but it's just like a model for everything else sustainability-wise, and that this discussion would apply to. And I think my main takeaway is that we need to work together. The international cooperation and cooperation between public and private sectors are absolutely essential, that we have to think long-term, and that we have to do this for the right reasons, and think about these issues globally. So just because something is not in my backyard, it doesn't mean that it's not affecting me. So thank you so much. I want to thank my panelists for fantastic remarks, and thank you all for being here with us and listening. Thank you.